The wind carried the smell of dust and dry grass across the wide prairie as the sun began to fall behind the distant hills. Evening always came quietly in that part of the territory, stretching long golden shadows across the land. The ranch house stood alone against the horizon, weathered boards creaking softly as the breeze passed through the gaps. Daniel Hayes sat on the wooden steps outside his ranch house, slowly sharpening a knife against a whetstone. The rhythmic scrape echoed faintly in the quiet. It had been a long day. Most days were long. Running a ranch alone meant there was always something to repair, something to chase down, something to survive. Daniel had grown used to the silence that followed his work. Years earlier, he had once imagined a house full of voices, children running through the yard, laughter drifting through open windows. But life had other plans. Now it was just him, the cattle, and the endless stretch of land. Rustling hooves suddenly broke the quiet. Daniel looked up. His horse, Ranger, stood near the fence, ears pointed toward the distant road. Someone was coming. Daniel rose slowly, sliding the knife into his belt as he stepped into the yard. A figure appeared far down the trail. At first he thought it was a traveler on horseback, but as the shape moved closer, he realized it was someone on foot. A woman. She stumbled more than walked. Daniel frowned. Few people traveled alone across these plains, and those who did rarely arrived looking like that. Her dress was torn and dusty. Her hair, once neatly tied, hung loose and tangled. She carried nothing but a small cloth bundle clutched tightly in her arms. Even from a distance, Daniel could see she was exhausted. He walked toward the gate. By the time she reached the fence, her legs seemed barely able to hold her up. "Miss," Daniel called gently. She didn't answer. She looked at him with wide, frightened eyes. For a moment she swayed where she stood. Then she collapsed. Daniel rushed forward, catching her before she hit the ground. She was shaking. Her skin was cold despite the warm evening air. "Easy," he said quietly. "You're safe." Her eyelids fluttered. Her lips moved weakly. Then she whispered something so faint Daniel barely heard it. "Please, not again." The words froze him where he stood. There was terror in her voice, not fear of the road, not fear of the journey, but something deeper, something that had happened before. Daniel gently lifted her in his arms and carried her toward the house. Inside, the ranch was simple but warm. A fire still glowed faintly in the stove from earlier cooking. He laid her carefully on the small bed in the corner and poured water into a tin cup. After a few moments, she stirred. Daniel sat nearby, giving her space. Her eyes slowly opened. She looked around the room quickly, panic rising in her expression. Then she saw him. She jerked backward against the pillow. "Don't," she said suddenly, her voice trembling. Daniel raised both hands calmly. "I'm not going to hurt you." Her breathing was fast. She looked toward the door, then the window, as if searching for an escape. "You fainted outside my ranch," Daniel said quietly. "I just brought you inside." She studied his face carefully. Something in his calm expression seemed to settle her nerves a little. After a long silence, she whispered, "Where am I?" "Hayes Ranch, about 20 miles from the nearest town." Her shoulders slowly relaxed, but the fear hadn't left her eyes. Daniel handed her the cup of water. "You look like you've been walking for days." She hesitated before taking it. Then she drank slowly, like someone who had been thirsty for far too long. "What's your name?" Daniel asked. She stared at the cup in her hands. "Lydia." "Lydia what?" She paused. Then quietly said, "Lydia Carter." Daniel nodded. "Well, Lydia Carter, you're safe here." She looked up sharply. "Safe?" The word seemed unfamiliar to her. "You can stay the night." Daniel added, "Storm's supposed to roll in tomorrow. No sense heading back out tonight." Her eyes flickered again with uncertainty. "I won't stay long. she said quickly. "That's fine," Daniel replied, "but for now you need rest." He stood and walked to the stove. "Have you eaten?" She shook her head. Daniel began heating a pot of stew. While it warmed, he glanced at her occasionally. She sat stiffly on the bed, clutching the blanket around her shoulders like armor. Every sound made her flinch. Every movement made her tense. Something had happened to her, something bad. When he brought the bowl of stew over, she looked hesitant again. "It's just food," Daniel said gently. Slowly, she accepted it. The smell alone seemed to make her realize how hungry she was. She ate quietly, carefully. Daniel returned to the table, pretending to focus on mending a rope so she wouldn't feel watched. After a while, she spoke. "You live here alone, have for 5 years, no family." Daniel shook his head. "They're gone." She didn't ask more. Silence returned. Outside, the wind had begun to pick up, rustling the dry grass across the fields. After finishing the stew, Lydia placed the bowl beside the bed. "Thank you." Daniel nodded. "You can sleep there tonight. I'll take the chair." Her eyes widened slightly. "You don't have to do that. Don't worry about it." She hesitated, then finally said, "You're very kind." Daniel gave a small shrug. "Just decent." That night the wind howled across the plains. The ranch creaked under the pressure of the storm as rain began to fall against the windows. Daniel sat in the chair near the fire, half asleep. Sometime deep into the night, a sudden scream jolted him awake. "No!" He jumped to his feet. Lydia was thrashing in the bed, tangled in the blankets. "Please," she cried out. "Not again. Don't." Daniel quickly stepped closer. "Lydia, wake up." Her eyes snapped open. For a moment she looked completely lost. Then she saw him. Fear flooded her face again. She shrank back against the wall. "Don't come closer." Daniel stopped immediately. "I'm not touching you." Her chest rose and fell rapidly. Tears filled her eyes. The room fell silent except for the wind outside. After a long moment, Lydia buried her face in her hands. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You had a nightmare." She nodded slowly. Daniel sat back down in the chair, giving her space again. After several minutes, she spoke softly. "I used to believe people were good." Daniel didn't respond. "I trusted someone once," she continued. "A man who promised me a better life." Her voice trembled. "He told me he'd marry me, said he had land, a ranch, a home waiting." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Another mail-order bride story," but Lydia continued. "When I arrived, it wasn't what he promised." Her hands shook slightly. "He wasn't kind." Daniel remained silent, letting her speak at her own pace. "He drank. A lot." The wind slammed against the house. "He locked the doors at night," she whispered. Daniel's fingers slowly curled into a fist. "He said no one would believe me if I ran." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "For months I stayed." Her voice dropped. "Until one night he came home drunk again." She swallowed hard. "And I realized if I stayed I wouldn't survive." Daniel leaned forward slightly. "So I ran." She nodded. "Walked all night, hid during the day, kept moving." Her eyes met his. "I thought when I saw your ranch maybe it was happening again." Daniel felt something heavy settle in his chest. That explained the whisper. "Please not again." He spoke quietly. "No one's locking doors here." Lydia studied him carefully. "You mean that?" "Yes." Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Days passed. The storm came and went. Lydia stayed. At first she remained cautious, always watching Daniel's movements, always keeping distance. But slowly she began to relax. She helped with small chores, cooking, cleaning, feeding chickens. Daniel noticed something about her. When she smiled, even briefly, it changed her entire face. Hope still lived inside her. It had just been buried under fear. One afternoon, while they repaired a fence together, Lydia suddenly laughed. The sound surprised them both. Daniel looked at her. "You all right?" She nodded, smiling. "I forgot what it feels like to laugh." Daniel smiled faintly. "You're doing it wrong then." She raised an eyebrow. "How so?" "Should happen more often." For the first time since arriving, Lydia's laughter came freely. Weeks passed. The ranch no longer felt empty. Then one afternoon a rider appeared on the distant trail. Daniel noticed immediately. His stomach tightened. Lydia stepped outside beside him. The rider approached slowly. When he finally dismounted at the gate, Lydia's entire body went rigid. Her face turned pale. Daniel noticed instantly. "You know him," she whispered. "That's him." The man stepped forward confidently. "Well, well," he said with a smirk. "Thought you could run forever." Daniel stepped between them. "Who are you?" "Name's Victor Hale." The man replied. "And that woman belongs to me." Daniel's eyes hardened. "No one belongs to anyone here." Victor chuckled. "She's my wife." Lydia's voice trembled. "No." Victor's smile faded slightly. "You signed the papers." "I never married you." He stepped closer. "Don't make this difficult." Daniel didn't move. "You're leaving," Daniel said calmly. Victor laughed. "You think you're stopping me." The tension in the air thickened. Lydia's voice suddenly broke through. "I'm not going back." Victor's expression turned cold. "You don't get a choice." But Daniel did not move aside. And for the first time since she had run away, Lydia realized something. She wasn't alone anymore. Hope hadn't died. It had just been waiting. And now it stood between her and the man who once took everything from her.